My name is Wang.
My name is Melissa Smith.
And I'm Becca Green. And then we also have our nobody names down there, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But as she said, we're part of International Senior Design here at Michigan Tech. And we went down to Filo Verde, Panama, and our team name is ABCs, but we'll be talking about our trip down there. So a little overview, we're going to do an introduction of where we went and the community, and then some of our personal experiences from our trip down there. And we'll talk about the water system that is our actual project that we're working on. And then we'll have a conclusion, and then at the end we'll have time for questions.
So as Caitlin mentioned, we were in Filo Verde, which is located in the Bocas del Toro district of Panama. You can see it on the arrow and the star on the map there. And in Filo Verde, there are two Peace Corps volunteers who are married, and that is Jordan and Sarah Garblay. And their nobody names are Tolly and Belly. And so we've mentioned Nobe a few times. That is because that is the language that they use in community, though most of them do speak Spanish as well. The community is located between two rivers right at the conjunction of them, and that is the Rio Caño Clarita and the Rio Caño Sucio. The community has about 49 homes, and there are 21 latrines there. 11 are properly being used, and of those latrines, there are some pit and some composting.
So there's about 375 people living in Filo Verde. It's a rapidly expanding community because most of the community members are below 20 years old because most women have between 6 and 10 children. There is an elementary school within Filo Verde, and that's where we stayed, and we'll talk about that later. But it's not very well attended. It's not, no one really tells the kids you have to go to school, and it's only for 3 hours in the morning, and they get food while they're there unless there's no water. And so they're eating habits. The community members eat a lot of food. We got a 2-pound bag of rice our first night there, plus some root vegetables, and I think we also had some meat in it as well. And there was only 4 of us there, so we had lots of leftovers, and they enjoyed that. But most of what they eat is the root vegetables that they grow themselves. They have a bit of a malnutrition problem because they don't think that they need protein or anything, and to get protein they have to go to the community store and buy that. So they'd rather just eat their root vegetables and be on with it. And so they have plenty of food, but they do have a bit of a malnutrition problem.
So it takes 2.5 miles from the nearest highway to the community, and the only way to enter the community is hiking, for there are so many obstacles such as muddy pits, gravel ponds, and rapids. And as you can see from the picture, the villagers are carrying pifa, which is peach plum in English. Like squash, pifa is one of the traditional catch crops in Filo Verde, and it is common for the villagers to carrying pounds of pifa and hiking 2.5 miles into the community once a while. As for me, the living condition in Filo Verde is quite tough. Another evidence the life in Filo Verde is quite tough is that the villagers have to hike in community needs, sometimes even their babies. I still remember the day when we entered Filo Verde. We encountered a couple carrying 40 pounds of their belongings, and the woman had just given birth to her baby. They struggled in the humidity and hiked to the community. So the living conditions have shocked me and kept challenging me once I stepped on its soil. Now I'm going to share about my personal experiences about how tough the life is in Filo Verde. I believe hiking is not a challenge for most of you. However, have you ever managed to hike in an extremely muddy and steepy place and managed not to fall down from the hill? I do. I still remember the day when we carried out our first task in Filo Verde. We did survey for a new spring source located at an elevated place. It was extremely rainy and muddy on that day, and having no hiking experiences, I was praying some rich man who can get us uphill by his helicopter. Obviously, neither the rich man nor God heard my voice. Fortunately, I made my way uphill. However, the downhill hiking experiences was the darkest memory in my life. I managed not to fall down badly, but I failed. So I begged the nobleman for 2 walking sticks, and how I wish I had more than 2 arms to hold more walking sticks so that I can stabilize myself. Although the hiking experiences was not so pleasant, I still treasure it a lot because I'm not afraid of hiking in my rest of my life. And I realized that being an engineer is far more easier than hiking.
So my favorite experience while we were in Filo Verde was the little kids. When we first got there, they were really shy and they would run away from us and not talk to us at all. But as we were there longer and longer and we walked through the community, they would always like yell out, what's your name in Spanish? And that's the only phrase that I know in Spanish now, which I'm glad I know that one. But when we were done surveying one day, we had tied a ribbon to the bridge. And after a few minutes, the little girls, they saw it and they got it, and we started they put it in a bow and we started to play with it and just toss it around like a hot potato. And they really enjoyed trying to interact with us. I think they enjoyed talking to me because I couldn't understand them at all. And Alyssa knows Spanish, but she was distracted with like sleeping and relaxing. And so they were just talking. I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, great. So I would play with them. We played with that ribbon for like an hour, and then Kelly, our advisor, she had a beach ball that she went and got, and they went crazy. The little boys joined the little girls, and they had a big fight with the ball, and they got it stuck on a roof one time. They had to go get a big stick and get it down, and they just continued to play with that. I could just sit down and watch, which was great because I might have gotten hurt. But the little kids are my absolute favorite part, and I think that beach ball is gone, but they probably have plenty of other toys that they can make great use, which is good.
So one of my experiences that I'd like to share from Filo Verde is my nightly trip to the latrine. So we had our little tent camp in one of the buildings in the school, and you can see that in this picture. There's a roof over, but obviously we wanted to cover our tent just because there were scorpions and all of the bugs we didn't want to sleep with us. And so every night I'd wake up in the middle of the night, no matter how many times I went to the bathroom during the day, and I'd have to go to the bathroom. And it was a pretty decent walk to get to the latrine. And the interesting part of this little journey is every night there'd be these little toads who were just flying across the pathway. And so every night when I went to the bathroom, I had to avoid these little guys, and it was like, I mean, they were everywhere in the bathroom, and at night they just were everywhere. So that was my little experience that I'd like to share.
So one thing that I'll remember is kind of a struggle for me in Panama was, especially at night, the rain. It didn't rain too much during the day, so that was kind of nice. We got to get our work done. But after dinner, it started raining just about when it got dark too, and it would just pour. And it was so loud on the school, like you couldn't even hear yourself think at times. And so that kept me up. It also didn't help that I had a flat air mattress the very first night, so I slept on concrete for the week basically. But then in the mornings at about 4 a.m. and 4:30 and 5 and so on until we actually got up, we got to listen to Dennis, the rooster that lived right outside the fence. And then some mornings there was also another rooster on the other side of the village that would just echo him. And I don't know how the community slept at all with all of that, but somehow I managed to get a few hours of sleep in there. And what we were actually down there to do during the daytime was dealing with their water distribution system. So here we have a little bit about their current system. It's 20 years old, so it's kind of near the end of its lifespan and requires a lot of maintenance. So it has a lot of problems that go along with it. It's unreliable, so there are times during the day where the community doesn't have water, and then there's times when they have plenty of water. And where we stayed in the school were some of the taps at higher elevations, and so a lot of times we'd go from tap to tap trying to get water so we could shower or even have water to drink. And sometimes none of the taps in the school had water at all. And the pipes break a lot. They aren't buried in the community. They're buried a little bit better because they're walking through there, water, but everywhere else, they're just on the ground. You can see them in that bottom left picture, that's the river crossing. And then the tank up there, they just go straight into the tank. They aren't really buried, so they break a lot. And we probably had like 2 or 3 of them break because we were in the village. And they don't completely fix them properly. A lot of times they just heat up one of the pipes over fire and then just kind of stick them together. And water is going through it the entire time that they're trying to repair them. So they're fast at repairing them because they don't have water until they repair them, but they aren't completely properly repaired. And it's also too small. Like we said earlier, they're a very rapidly growing community, which means they need more water than what they're getting. And so that's another problem they're having with it, is there's just not enough water all the time. And then there are a few houses that are above that tank, and so for them to get water, they kind of just cut into the pipe above the tank. So they always have water, but they're cutting into the water that should be going to the rest of the community too. So it's kind of one of those unfair political problems that's also in the community. And they do have a water committee though, which is very helpful. It's still kind of developing, and they have monthly meetings with this committee. There's 8 people on it, 2 of which are women. And a lot of their meetings, they're led by Sarah and Jordan, these core volunteers in there. And they're trying to get them more organized so that they'll be able to run themselves. So they do have a treasurer. He keeps track of their budget, and they're working on getting like dues paid by the community members and getting a system set up for that. So they're very young. It's just a start, but it's a start of something at least. So next.
So the principles for surveying in Filo Verde were to examine the water distribution system and the community. As you can see from the Google Earth map, the new spring source is located far north of the community, which is shown on the top of the map. Along this road, there are so many river crossings, which are the main challenges for our future design. And at the end of the road is the community. There are 99 forceps, which demonstrated by those white dots. The existing water distribution system is located between the new spring source and the community. Consisting of the current spring source and miles of pipelines and a water tank, the existing water distribution system has been served for 20 years, as people mentioned. And as for those charts on the left, they are the elevation profiles for both current and new spring sources to the community. And obviously that both sources are located in elevated places, so the both current water distribution system and the future water distribution system are gravity-fed systems. And since the new spring source is located in a far more elevated place than the current spring source, so we believe the future water distribution system will provide more reliable water supply into the community. And finally, we have applied those profiles into our design. So let's invite Becca to deliver more details.
So we collected all of this data, and then as soon as we got back to TAC, we put this into EPAnet. EPAnet is a water distribution analyzing program that we're going to use to figure out how to add in the new spring source, which is at the bottom right on the screen, into this whole system that Jordan surveyed for us for a month while he was there. If he hadn't done that, our system would look like about half, maybe a quarter of as detailed as that one is. So what we're going to use EPAnet is to figure out the best way for us to add in this new system into the current system so that the old and new tanks don't vie for pressure and it's still really reliable in getting water to everyone and there's no problems with pipes breaking or anything from the pressure. So that's what we're working on right now. So another thing we did while we were in Filo Verde was analyze the water quality. We analyzed the quality from both spring sources, the tank that they have, and then some of the taps around the community. So on the left, we have a test from a tap and a bucket. From the tap, we didn't have any E. coli, which is a good sign, but we had about 18 fecal coliforms. And then the water from this source, Celia's house, ran out. And so what they do with it when they run out of water is they have a bucket just sitting underneath their tap. And so we took water from that, and the buckets are not very clean. As you can see, it's about 10 times as dirty as the tap water. So they're, and the water committee meetings, they're going to talk about using chlorine or anything to make sure everything's clean so they don't get sick from their water. And so we also tested the water from the river and Rio Clarita, which is clear water. Doesn't look very clear from our test. There's lots of E. coli and fecal coliforms, so it's not very clean. They use that for washing their clothes and sometimes extra water if they don't have any water in the system. And then, so I mentioned chlorination. We also tested Rio Clarita chlorinated, and that seems to work very well, so hopefully they'll adopt chlorination in home to their water, and hopefully that will help with health and wellness in the community.
So what are we actually doing? So as an international city design group, we are going to design a rehabilitation of the current water system, which includes redesigning the tank and putting it at a higher elevation so that those houses that are above the tank right now won't be cutting in. They'll be getting their water from the tank. And we also will be designing cutoff valves throughout the community, and that will help with maintenance so that there isn't water running through the pipes while they're trying to fix them. We also will be designing a piping system from the new source, which Cliff mentioned before is pretty high up, so we'll probably have to put pressure brake tanks in there, or we definitely will. And we will be designing connection from the spring source into a tank into the new system. So as Becky mentioned before, we are trying to make their system more reliable. So in conclusion, the Filo Verde community is a rapidly expanding community. A lot of members of the community are under 20 years old. They currently have an unreliable water system, and we will be designing a system to make that more reliable and designing a solution. And one other thing we'd like to mention is that this was a very enlightening experience. Not having water and not having electricity and not having just the simple comforts of home while we were there definitely makes you appreciate being in the U.S. and growing up how we have. So, thank you for listening to our presentation, and here is a list of our references. And at this time, we